Some stories are too disturbing to ignore. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's real experiences shared by people who found themselves in terrifying situations. From strange noises in the dead of night to shadows that don't belong, these stories will keep you awake long after you've finished watching, like if you love horror. Subscribe, hit the bell so you never miss a scare. Share with friends. Comment your scariest experience. Story 1. I used to work the overnight shift at a small gas station off a rural highway. It was one of those places where barely anyone stops after midnight, except for long-haul truckers or the occasional drunk trying to find their way home. Most nights were quiet, almost boring, but what happened one night still keeps me awake whenever I think about it. It was close to 2 a.m. when I heard the bell above the glass door chime. I looked up from my phone, expecting some random customer, but what stepped in immediately felt wrong. A tall man, easily 6'5", ducked under the doorway to get inside. His clothes looked outdated, an old brown coat that looked like it had been through a war, boots caked in dried mud, and a wide-brimmed hat that hid most of his face. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there in the doorway, as if adjusting to the lights inside. Evening, I said, trying to sound casual. Need help finding something? He didn't answer. He just tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. Then, without breaking eye contact, he walked slowly down one of the aisles. The sound of his boots on the old linoleum echoed unnaturally in the empty store. I kept my eyes on the monitor above the register, watching him as he drifted between shelves without picking up a single thing. At one point, he stopped in front of the security camera and just stared directly into it, into me. I swear for a solid minute he didn't move a muscle. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. His reflection wasn't showing up in the mirror at the end of the aisle. I blinked hard, thinking maybe my tired brain was playing tricks, but when I looked again the man was still standing there, his massive frame visible in the aisle, but the mirror showed nothing but empty shelves. My hands started trembling as I reached for the phone behind the counter, but before I could dial anyone, the man finally moved. He walked back toward the front, his boots thudding heavier this time, and stopped right at the counter. Up close I could see his face. His skin looked grayish, almost ashy, and his eyes, they weren't right. They looked like two pitch-black pools, no whites at all. "You're here." "Late," he finally said, his voice low and gravelly, like it came from somewhere deep underground. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out shaky. "Yeah, night shift. Gotta keep the place running." He leaned closer, his face just inches from mine, and whispered, "They always come for the ones who are alone." Before I could react, the lights above us flickered violently, and the hum of the refrigerators cut out. For a moment, the whole store was plunged into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, he was gone. The door never chimed, the camera showed no sign of him leaving, and the only sound left was the buzzing of the lights trying to stabilize. I checked the footage later. Every second of the encounter was there, except for him. The cameras showed me talking, trembling, reacting to something, but there was no man, no boots, no shadow, nothing. That was the last night I ever worked alone at that gas station. Story 2. Back when I was in college, I took a job as a night security guard at an old office building downtown. It was mostly empty after 7 p.m., and my only job was to walk the halls, check the doors, and sit at the front desk watching the cameras until my shift ended at 6 in the morning. Easy money, or so I thought. The building had 10 floors, but only the first 3 were occupied by businesses. Everything above that was abandoned. Dusty, unused offices with broken furniture and papers scattered from years ago. My supervisor specifically told me, "Don't bother going higher than the 3rd floor. There's nothing up there." At first, I didn't question it, but one night I started hearing noises. It was past 3 a.m. and the place was dead silent. I was watching the monitors when I picked up what sounded like faint footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate. I checked the cameras for the 4th floor, but they were so old and blurry I could barely make out shapes. Still, I could see movement. Something was pacing back and forth. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and took the elevator up. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, a blast of stale, icy air hit me. The lights overhead flickered weakly, and the hallway stretched into shadows. I stepped out, the sound of my own boots echoing like I was in a cave. As I made my way down the hall, I noticed the offices were still full of old desks, phones, and filing cabinets, like everyone had just left one day and never came back. Then I saw something that froze me. In one of the glass office doors, there was a reflection. Not mine, but a man's face staring back at me from inside the room. I whipped around, shining my flashlight, but the office was empty. Empty. Except for the faint outline of a handprint pressed against the dusty glass, fresh like someone had just touched it. My gut told me to leave, but my brain kept saying, "Check the room. Prove to yourself it's empty." I opened the door slowly. The hinges screeched loud enough to echo across the whole floor. Inside, the air was colder, and the smell of mold was overwhelming. Papers lay scattered on the floor, some of them damp, others yellowed. As I stepped further in, the door slammed shut behind me. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second I saw him. A man in a black suit standing at the far corner of the office. His face was blurred like my eyes couldn't focus on it, but his head twitched unnaturally fast, snapping side to side. The moment I blinked, he was gone. I ran out of there, but when I hit the hallway, every office door was wide open. They'd all been closed just seconds before. From inside each room came whispers, low, layered voices, speaking too quietly to understand, but loud enough to make my skin crawl. I bolted for the elevator, but when I got inside and the doors started to close, I heard running footsteps rushing toward me, heavy, fast, like someone sprinting down the hall. Right before the doors sealed shut, a pale hand shot between them, long fingers, too long to be human, but they slid closed anyway. I didn't stop the elevator until I was back on the ground floor. After that night, I told my boss I wouldn't take any more shifts. He just nodded, almost like he already knew what I'd seen. To this day, I avoid that building whenever I pass it, and every time I look up at the dark windows of the upper floors, I swear I see a shadow pacing back and forth. Story 3. A few years back, I rented a small cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. I wanted to disconnect from everything. No phone, no internet, just peace and quiet. The cabin was cheap, almost too cheap, but I didn't question it at the time. The owner met me in town, handed me the key, and simply said, "Stay inside at night. Don't wander. Don't open the door if you hear anything." I laughed it off, thinking it was just some local superstition. But that warning would haunt me. The first night was uneventful. I cooked dinner, read a book, and sat on the porch listening to the crickets. By midnight, the woods grew eerily silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. Just a heavy stillness that made me uncomfortable. I locked the doors and went to bed. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up to knocking, slow, deliberate knocks on the wooden door. I froze. I hadn't seen another soul for miles, and the cabin was in the middle of nowhere. My first thought was maybe the owner came back, but something about the sound felt wrong. Too calm, too patient. I whispered, "Who's there?" but got no answer. Just 3 more knocks. Steady, almost rhythmic. My chest tightened as I remembered the owner's words. "Don't open the door if you hear anything." I stayed perfectly still, listening. After a while, the knocks stopped. But then, the windows. Something brushed against the glass, moving from one side of the cabin to the other, slow and deliberate, like fingers dragging across the panes. My heart was pounding so loud I swore whatever was outside could hear it. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it toward the nearest window. For a split second, I saw it. A pale face pressed against the glass, eyes wide, mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. The second the light hit it, it ducked out of view. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I shut myself in the bedroom and pushed the dresser against the door. From the other side of the cabin, I could hear footsteps circling, dragging along the walls, then scratching. Long, deliberate scratches, like nails carving into wood. At some point, I must have blacked out from fear, because the next thing I remember is waking up to sunlight. The cat Story 4. When I was younger, I worked at a nursing home. Most shifts were routine, helping residents with meals, checking on them at night, and keeping the halls quiet. But there was one wing of the building that nobody liked to cover: the West Wing. It was technically closed, but sometimes patients would wander there. The lights always flickered in that part of the building, and the air was colder, heavier. Staff used to joke it was haunted, but after what I experienced, I don't think it was a joke. One night around 1 a.m., I was making rounds when I noticed a door slightly open down that wing. It belonged to a room that had been vacant for years. I pushed it open with my flashlight, expecting dust and empty furniture. Instead, I saw someone sitting on the bed. It was an old woman in a hospital gown, her hair long and gray, head tilted down. I thought maybe a patient had wandered in, so I stepped closer and said softly, "Ma'am, you're not supposed to be in here." She didn't respond. She just kept rocking slightly back and forth, whispering something too low for me to make out. My gut told me to leave, but I reached out anyway to gently touch her shoulder. The second my fingers brushed the fabric, the room went ice cold and the lights overhead shut off completely. I yanked my hand back, fumbling for my flashlight, and when the beam flickered on, the bed was empty. No woman, no gown. Just an indentation in the mattress, like someone had been sitting there for a long time. I stumbled back into the hallway, breathing hard, when I saw movement at the end of the corridor. A shadow, tall and thin, darting across the wall even though there was no light behind it to cast it. The whispering started again, but this time it was all around me. Dozens of voices overlapping, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I ran back toward the active wing of the building, but when I passed the nurses' station, one of the call lights started flashing. It was coming from the same room I had just left, the vacant one. I froze, staring at the panel as the buzzer kept going off. There was no way. That room wasn't connected to the system anymore. Another nurse came over, annoyed, and asked what was going on. I tried to explain, but when she looked at the panel, the light wasn't flashing anymore. She just gave me a look like I was imagining things. Later that night, I checked the visitor log out of curiosity. My hands went cold when I saw a name written down for that same room. A woman's name, dated 5 years earlier. The exact day she had passed away in that bed. That was my last shift in the West Wing. Some of the older nurses still refuse to talk about that room. But every now and then, when I drive past that nursing home late at night, I swear I can see a figure in the window, sitting on the bed, rocking slowly back and forth. Sometimes the scariest part of these stories isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. To anyone. Maybe even you. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget, like this video if it gave you chills. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next scare. Share it with friends who love horror. Comment your own scary experience. You might be featured next time.